Hello, my name is Nathaniel. Welcome to this full moon guidance for the full moon on the 5th of May 2023. That's the full moon in Scorpio. And I'm giving you some channeled messages from Spirit for all of humanity. So it's not an astrological guidance reading, but a channeled message from Spirit reading for this full moon. The initial impression I'm getting from Spirit around this full moon is regarding the nature of its energy. I feel like there's a lot of fast moving energy with this full moon, as though it's in high velocity in terms of how it's affecting us emotionally. And it's almost as though they're showing the moon and its energy as though it's spinning. It's like a spinning top. And it's as though anything that tries to latch onto that spinning energy is just going to be flung off. Nothing can hold onto that. Nothing can stick to that. And what that is anything that is of a lower energy for you, anything that you're done with, anything that needs to be erased from your life, anything that is redundant, it's gonna just not be able to fit in your life. And if you try to keep it in your life, it's gonna cause a lot of suffering, and it would just be like trying to slow down something that's really moving in a real high speed. It would just cause, and it would hurt you. You wouldn't be able to catch up with that speed. You'd just be cast aside, flung off. You would just it would destroy you to try to hang on to that real fast moving energy. And to give you an example, if you could imagine a roundabout, a child's roundabout or a merry-go-round that's spinning really, really fast, and not just from being hand pushed, but as though imagine it's been mechanized or motorized with an engine, and it's moving at a really high speed. And then imagine trying to touch one of the bars of that, and the pain that's obviously gonna be inflicted on your hands if you try to touch that at that high speed, or trying to get onto that. You're not going to be able to do that without being deterred away by the speed, by being flung off quite violently and being hurt. And it feels like this would be the effect on us as individuals if we're trying to include anything in our lives now that is of a lower energy, that doesn't serve us, that isn't healthy, that doesn't nourish us or feed us, not only in terms of things that we eat, things that we consume, things that we do, addictions, things like this, but also just ways of being in life, ways of being in terms of our attitudes, our values, our paradigms, and our belief systems. Also emotions that are linked to painful wounds of the past, painful experiences and memories, and those are going to be needing to be felt and shared and released moving forwards. So if you're feeling like a lot's coming up right now and you're feeling a bit dislocated by that, a bit unhinged by that, it is because the energy is moving very fast, and so there's many things that are going to be surfacing for you at this time, and you're supposed to just feel that and let it kind of surface and peak within you until it kind of just lifts away. But let it move, and don't try to hang on to anything like comforts and coping mechanisms and crutches while this happens. Obviously, if you have vices in place that are difficult for you to release and have been, just do your best to feel the full spectrum of your feelings right now, even if you have things that are sedating you from doing that a little bit, such as medications or any other form of drug or substance or anything that you're using addictively. Just do your best to lean into the intention to feel what life is helping you to become aware of, and what life is helping you to have access to within yourself to feel and release. So to give you more information, more insight as to the nature of this energy and how to navigate it, it's quite strange, but I'm getting this image of like a salad spinner, and when you put the salad into the salad spinner to remove the excess water, and that movement, that mechanism, that function, and the speed of that is very similar to how this energy is working. But we're going to feel kind of caught up in that energy, as though, at one moment we've been quite peaceful, and then all of a sudden everything's coming up and it's feeling quite intense, and it may feel as though you're losing a sense of grip over your stability and the momentum that you've built for your life, like the positive momentum. If you've been in a good place and things are coming up that feel very emotional and very kind of psychologically grueling for you. This energy is going to make it feel as though you're unraveling again. But just go through it, allow yourself to go through it, because I do feel that, like that salad spinner analogy, it's just releasing anything that's excess, anything that's unneeded, anything that's unnecessary, anything that's just redundant. It's being purged from you by this energy. So, it's kind of like being through a spin cycle in the washing machine, and when it's, rinsing all of the excess water out of the laundry, it's kind of like we're the laundry, and that's what the energy is doing to us. So it might feel a little bit like we're being a bit beaten up by this energy. It might feel a little bit cumbersome emotionally, and it might feel as though we're in a bit of a low right now. But just go through this and allow yourself to feel what you personally are feeling, because I feel that this energy at this full moon is getting us to feel it intensely, but it's also helping us to release it more easily as a result of this. Another sensation I'm getting from the energy of this full moon is this feeling of, I'm seeing this image of a scorpion and its stinger, and the fact that this full moon is in Scorpio. And I feel as though the energy is conducive around this full moon to really targeting, right in the bullseye, anything in your life that is needing you to, anything that you're needing to really move forwards with and really knuckle down on or attack and just really quantum leap forwards with, or anything that you need to eliminate. And it feels very cut and dry. And it feels as though we need to allow ourselves to have a sacred anger, like a sacred determination about this. It feels as though we're needing to have a bit of a fiercer kind of energy, not outwardly projecting this onto others or into life itself, but channeling a fierceness, channeling a inner sense of no nonsenseness, and anything that's really challenging us or holding us back, or anything that's feeling like it's debilitating our evolution or our movement forwards, especially things that affect our self-esteem, especially things that affect our ability to move forwards confidently and in the flow of our life purpose. And especially anything that prevents us from having the connection to ourselves that we know we want and need, and the connection to others and the types of people that we want to connect with. And also, obviously, our connection to nature, to all of life. Anything that is at odds with that, it's almost as though this energy is bringing us into a battle with it. But a battle that we're supposed to win if we're channeling this energy correctly. And I almost feel as though this scorpion stinger is almost like us sort of stinging and sort of targeting anything that tries to hold us back and sort of paralyzing it. And the energy is kind of just helping us and by removing that, and we need to cooperate with that energy by being willing to work with it in that way. And then I also feel this sense of like a stillness as well around this time of the full moon. So we've got all of this fast moving energy and a lot of emotional and mental upheaval, which we need to experience to know what we need to release and to know what we don't want and what we do want, and to have the painful contrast push us into surrender into the direction of what's best for us and what we truly want for ourselves. Alongside all of that, I do feel like a stillness, and I'm sort of just seeing this single candle flame lit, and it just feels like whilst all that's happening, there is a presence being given to all of us, a real enhanced I am presence behind us, that's, while we're going through this intensity, is anchoring us into that sense of presence, so that we can still feel anchored to all of life and to the bigger picture, and also to have this quiet backseat awareness of knowing that all is well, and helping us to lean into trust, and also helping us to just remain meditative and centered while we're going through this purging process and this shedding, because this shedding and this purging process feels it's obviously the hallmark of this awakening that we're going through, but it feels like it's really kicking up speed and kicking up velocity and getting towards some sort of breaking point, some sort of peaking point where, there's going to be some sort of pendulum swing to another way of being in our society. But right now it does feel like we're needing to really allow ourselves to be centered as we go through this shedding process. And at this full moon, I feel that there is an energy that's helping that, and it's kind of bolstering that sense of stillness within us, also bolstering a sense of discernment within us, so that we're not being too carried away with the purging and being too overwhelmed by that to the point where we shut down or we become ungrounded or unstable. It's as though it's keeping us still so that we can hold space for that process, whilst also still having discernment for anything else that's coming up, anything else that we need to do, any other ways that we need to move forwards with our lives positively at this time. There is a really potent and powerful force coming through at this time during the full moon as well, and it feels very enraged, it feels very ferocious, it feels very unbeatable and very determined and forthright. And I'm seeing this image of this almost like a tiger or a lion roaring, and I'm seeing that superimposed onto a human. And I feel as though we are gonna feel a real sense of absolute resistance, but ferocious resistance that could be fueled by this sense of anger and rage at just no longer wanting to tolerate injustice, no longer wanting to, not just in the world, but how we're treated in our own lives as well, on a microcosm as individuals and on a macrocosm as a society as well. Also no longer wanting to stand for secrecy and lies and things that keep us in the dark and make us feel confused and gaslighted and just make that things that make life difficult for us, not only as a collective, but anything that's at odds with us in our lives, that's making us feel like this is really putting me through it in my life and I don't choose this anymore. I don't want to put up with this anymore. I don't tolerate this anymore. And it's not just taking a stand. It really feels like we have an energy of really pushing against something and saying no, and really channeling a lot of power in that pushing against, in a way where that which we're pushing against really does take a step back or flinches and is kind of like, oh. And I just feel like that could be connected to relationships in our lives, where we are no longer tolerating the crossing of our boundaries. We're no longer being made to feel small, and we're standing up as individuals for our rights and also for our hearts and for truth. And I also feel collectively it's definitely that feeling with regards to our governments and the power systems and power structures in the world that make us feel oppressed, that suppress us as individuals and as collectives and as communities and keep anybody that feels marginalized. I certainly feel that there's going to be this feeling, this passion and energy of just wanting a better world, wanting a world where that isn't the case anymore, where we don't feel that oppression anymore, where we don't experience those kinds of situations of suffering anymore as a people. But I also feel in our own private lives, we're going to feel that towards the resistance in ourselves. We're going to feel that rage, that sense of frustration building up towards that which holds us back in our lives, any behaviors that hold us back, anything we're identified with in terms of ways of being as a person that keeps us small, keeps us feeling inadequate, inferior, just being so tired of this to the point where we just want to scream and just face it like a raging bull and just charge through it. I also want to bring attention to anyone that is going to be struggling or is already struggling with their grip on reality right now, and also the grip on their mind, their mental health, because I do feel that there's an energy around this full moon that's making us aware of things that are really niggling away at us, and things that are things that are being released, but during the releasing process, the discomfort of it being released is also quite a grueling process that erodes us down and can erode down our mental health. And it feels, if I'm to give you an example, it's almost as though there's a tap dripping, and no matter how tightly you do the tap, you can hear it dripping. And you can hear it dripping while you're sleeping. You can hear it dripping while you're trying to concentrate. You can hear it dripping while you're trying to meditate. You can hear it dripping while you're trying to write, while you're trying to read, while you're trying to do anything where you're trying to relax and be still, be present, and to be in the flow of life. And you're just hearing this dripping, and it's though it's getting into your cranium, into your mind in a way where it's making you wince, it's making your eye twitch. You're starting to feel a bit unhinged by it, and it's starting to make you feel as though it's driving you a bit insane. And I feel that this is an analogy to compare to the energy of what it's feeling like with anything within us that we know isn't the real us. We know that it's something that affects us. Maybe it's some sort of wound, or maybe it's some sort of life circumstance that we're grappling with. For example, maybe it's materially, and we're grappling with not having a lot of money, or maybe it's emotionally, and we're grappling with not having a lot of confidence. But then at the same time, we know we're supposed to have that in place. We know that that is our destiny. We have this sense of, but I have desires. I know I know that I want what I want, and I know that in order for me to have what I want, these aspects that are not currently in place must then be meant to be in place. And it's almost as though the awareness of what we want and the awareness of what we feel is missing to allow us to experience what we want, be that materially or even emotionally, in terms of how we're developing ourselves as a person, and the level of peace that we want to feel, and the level of ease that we want to feel living life. If we're feeling that anything's amiss, it's to say that feeling of it being amiss is the dripping tap, and it's driving us a little bit insane. And I feel this energy at the full moon is just for us to be aware of this. And I feel once that there's this sort of intense spin cycle, shedding, purging energy, followed by this sort of ferocious determination that we're going to feel, there's going to be this residual sort of energy just tapering off from the full moon as it starts to wane again. And I feel like it's going to make us feel a little frustrated, but also I feel as though it will make us feel a little bit mentally unbalanced and a little bit mentally unstable, as though we're a little bit desperate, and as though it could feel a little bit torturous, and it's almost like the final dregs of something being released, and then eventually the taps dripping, and then it's dripping less and less. The time between each drop is wider and wider, longer and longer, and then eventually it just stops. And I do feel that in order for us to get through that time, we're going to need to allow ourselves time in nature, outside, physical contact with the earth. And I also feel that it's a time of allowing ourselves to be with people and to talk about this. I certainly don't feel that this is a time of distraction from it, though. I feel like we're really needing to embrace fully right now everything that we're feeling and experiencing, and to take it into ourselves like a child that we're looking after. And I feel that we're really needing to just hold space for everything that we're feeling, and for that to feel easier for us, and for us to be able to allow that process during this full moon. I really do feel that we just need to stay in communication about this with our nearest and dearest, and in conscious communication with life itself. I want us to all be talking to life, to the intelligence that's there in the air that you're breathing right now, that's aware of you. Everything is alive. Even the walls around you are alive. The floor beneath you, everything is alive. There isn't anything that isn't of the source of all that is, which is pure sentient essence, pure aliveness. So even when you're looking around at physical objects, you know, the idea of that just being a physical, inanimate material object with no life or consciousness is an illusion. It's actually still part of the ecosystem, the organism, the superorganism of the all that is, the one true source of all consciousness, of all aliveness. It's part of that. So we are that. It is just one being. So there isn't anything around you that isn't alive and listening to itself, you know. So when I say it in that sense, you're talking to yourself. When you're talking to life, it's God feeding back with God. It's God contemplating God, having a conversation with itself and getting to know itself. So at this time, be in communication with life. Tell life about what it is that you're struggling with and how you wish for it to be easier. Ask for the support. Ask for divine intervention. Ask for heavenly assistance with anything that you're struggling with. Ask for mental clarity and for the emotions to be easier to process and easier to release. And allow yourself time in nature as well, because around this time it's going to be 10 times easier to process the overwhelm in a way where you're not just chasing your tail with it, or in a way where you're not just getting overwhelmed and swamped and then just kind of, you know, wading through treacle, sorting through piles into other piles and not really getting anywhere with anything because of the energy being too cumbersome and sort of overwhelming you and just getting you into a space where you're going around in circles with it. Nature will really help to diffuse all of that, and being in the greenery, being, you know, physically contacting the earth, touching the trees, looking at nature around you, being with it, not just going for a really fast, brisk walk through a field and saying, oh, I went to nature today, but really spending some hours in it, really immersing your time in nature and being with it, the presence of it. That's really going to help us at this time to process the overwhelm that we may experience as individuals. Much like the new moon that's just come before, this full moon is feeling very much like a portal. Obviously, this is eclipse season. This is an eclipse moon that's coming up. So these are gateways, transitions. These are portals of change, of transformation. And these portals aren't necessarily just physical portals that exist out there in the cosmos, but they're more portals of consciousness, thresholds that we're passing through as individuals. And there is another threshold that we're passing through around this full moon, where it's really kind of in the way that the new moon felt like we were passing through into something totally brand new. This feels very much the same, but it's almost as though it's augmenting that. It's as though it's igniting that. It's as though it's really it's setting fire to that, so that it's really in full power, in full gear. And I just feel that if we haven't been ready to change and cooperate with the callings of the cosmos at this time, then this energy is just going to feel like it's constantly hitting the wound, constantly hitting the trigger. It will just feel like the emotions are constantly flaring up, and it's just going to feel like everything is, on steroids for you. Whereas if you have been doing your best to consciously process things and consciously change and consciously listen into what life is trying to talk to all of humanity about right now, and you really are leaning into your truest sense of self, then this time is going to be an intense time still for you, but there's going to be a way out of it. It's not going to feel hopeless. It's not going to feel so despairing. It's just going to feel intense, but you're going to subtly feel this sense of, I know that this is something I'm supposed to go through. The energy of this full moon feels very similar to, if I could give you an example of, say, for example, you're watching a movie and they show a flashback, and the flashback is kind of characterized by, the scene will sort of flash with light and then show this dreamy sequence of the past, and then it will flash with light back to the present again. And it's almost as though we've been in this flashback, and the moon is this energy that's kind of like, flashing all this light and, and then after this, that dreamy sort of sequence is over, and then there's a new sequence, there's a new space, a new scene. And it certainly feels like that at this full moon, as though we're literally coming out of something that's going to feel like a dream. It will feel after this full moon as though what's come before wasn't real. And especially for those of us that are leaning in to the energy. For anyone that is really struggling right now, that's really struggling to align with the awakening, that's really struggling to just mentally even get on board with this idea of existence and the source of you, the origin of you, and being an eternal being, and actually being willing to work with existentiality in that sense, and with consciousness in that sense, and starting to ask questions like, what am I? What is this? Where do we go? Where do we come from? What is this all about? This aliveness, Anyone that's really grappling with that and just can't really face that trippy existential kind of, can't have that confrontation with awareness, you're really going to struggle with your mental health. Life is going to feel very strange to you, and you might even find yourself feeling like you're going crazy. You might feel like you're tripping out, as though you're losing your mind, and it was going to feel very scary to you. And it's not because you are, it's because you're resisting the energy, the intelligence, the intelligent force of the universe that's really calling you back home to it as its child, and you're resisting that. And I do feel like quite a lot of sadness with that. I feel quite a lot of panic and fear and overwhelm, because this is not easy. If you're someone that's lived your life just being in life, not really thinking about the afterlife, not thinking about anything that's come before, not really taking religion and the bigger picture as something that serious or that much of a need for you to think about, and just being really in the earth life, being so tunneled into earth life like that, and then having this energy come in that's really making us, it's dropping these bombs of deliberate awareness that are kind of exploding in our consciousness right now in really big ways. And then this existentiality, this awareness of beingness that's coming up, this deliberate moments of awareness, of aliveness, of being a being in existence. It's so intense, such a intense dose of awareness, and that's why, if you're not working with that, that's why it's going to send you a bit crazy. But I do understand how intense that is, to go from being in one paradigm to then being, having this awakening trying to stimulate you into a totally different way of being. That's just very scary. It's a very scary place to be. It's akin to, imagine people living in medieval times when they really did believe, many people in certain areas, they really did believe in heaven and hell. They really did believe in the Christian idea of reality. And anyone that lived in that time and really believed that, it would be so difficult for them to, pull themselves away from that reality. It would really, if they're that conditioned and that lulled into that, it would be really difficult for them to imagine, a spiritualist perspective of everything being all okay in the universe, and there being a source of love, and that, no one's punished for eternity. It would be such a different paradigm to jump to and from. It would just be really, really mentally jarring, but probably even less so than those of us who have lived in a sort of atheist kind of mindset, or in a mindset of seeing anything spiritual as just far-fetched and wacky and not real, and thinking that when you're dead and that's it. To then go from that into an awakened sense of the infinite possibilities of the multiverse and the multidimensional nature of us as beings, that's a big deal. And there are some people who are not going to be able to accommodate that, and they won't be able to stay in this reality. They will not make it. There will be some people that won't make it in the coming years. They will have to leave this reality because they won't be able to get on board with that energy, not because there's anything wrong with them, but because the nature of their lives and their choices has led them up to that point where it's they can't get on board with that. There's too much momentum of their old paradigm, and the worlds can't meet. It's too much. It's like oil and water. It just can't connect. Following this full moon, and as we proceed into the new moon and subsequent lunar cycles, I do feel that people that have been willingly working with the energy of the cosmos and the shedding process that's happening for us all, and this alignment with nature that we're all being coerced into, those of us that are really getting on board with the oneness, with the unity and the energy that's coming through from that, I do feel as the months proceed, we're going to feel an increased sense of lightness and an increased sense of transcendence from the difficulties of life, and also an increased sense of transcendence from mental difficulties, emotional difficulties, and it's especially the word despair is coming in. I feel as though we're going to feel much more transcendent from those lower energies of despair that some people are still going to be quite mired into, like quite bogged down with, if they're struggling to get on board with all of life and to let go of the old paradigms of separation and lack of oneness, and the indifference, the apathy, the lack of connection, the lack of empathy. People that are really kind of staying in the old, colder, hardened world and not really listening to the call for us to come into a more interdependent, harmonious, connected kind of world that we're all actually wanting. Those of us that are in resistance to that, where you're really going to get bogged down. In fact, you probably won't even be listening to this or anything like this. So for those of you that are and know those people, they're really going to struggle as the days, weeks, months and years start to pass by, moving forwards. Those people are really going to struggle, and I just feel like they're just going to drop off the planet. Generationally dependent on their age and when they're ready to go. But anyone that's still sticking around, I feel like they're gonna fall apart. Life's gonna feel very difficult for them, and I almost feel this sort of tipping point happening between all of those that have kind of been the showstoppers and the show runners and the leaders and the heads of the cliques, the queen bees, the king bees, all the popular ones that have led the elitism of the past, that have, led the old paradigm and have really championed these impossible standards of humanity, that have really, taking that torch of elitism and run with it, that are still in indifference, that still see life as something separate to them and see others as something separate to them, that are still in that sort of narcissistic place of othering people and themselves, and sort of that narcissistic place of othering themselves in a way where they see themselves as above, or see themselves as me and them, and lacking empathy as a result of that. It's almost as though the tables are going to turn, and those people that have always seemed to be able to just go through reality unscathed, not feeling a great deal from the things that they do and the impacts they cause, and not caring a great deal. It's almost as though the tables are going to turn in the cosmos, and all of those people are going to become the ones that really struggle, are going to become the ones that need the other people's help, that are going to be the ones that turn to all the gentle ones and ask them, oh, please help me open my heart. I don't want to get left behind. I'm really feeling this, and I don't know how to navigate this. And we're really going to have to, those of us that are kind of on that other side of the coin of wanting to really connect and align with the universe, and I do feel that split in humanity in that sense, we're really going to need to open our hearts and be compassionate and leave the door open for them, and not take this attitude of, well, the unawakened ones will just not make it, because that is an unawakened mindset to have. It's not a mindset of love or compassion or of empathy. We're all brothers and sisters, and our brothers and sisters that may have been our enemies or our bullies or our naysayers in the past, they're gonna change. They're gonna melt. They are gonna break down. They're gonna become more desperate and more needy, and they're gonna need us, the ones that are listening, and they're gonna need us to help them come back home. And I just see us, I sort of see hands meeting, sort of hands joining, sort of like, like that sort of Michelangelo's, that scene of Michelangelo and the finger from heaven touching the human finger, and it's almost as though, I don't feel anything divine about it. I just mean in terms of us coming together as a people, and those of us that maybe have resented being cast aside, being marginalized, or feeling as though we are the underdogs that are at odds with those who are elitists and have kind of been those people in the world that have run away with materialism and with the ego and with all the impossible standards of the world that are really, and the capitalism, and really just championing that and enjoying that. Those of us that have been resentful of this, or have been felt victimized by this way of being, or impacted negatively by this in terms of society or individuals, we're going to need to find forgiveness and understanding, because these people are going to wake up from that coma, but in a way that's really painful for them. And some of them will fight it and to their death, and some of them will fight it to mental breakdown and mental collapse, but they're going to need us. And with that, I do feel like I'm at the end of this message. I feel this full moon is a potent one during this eclipse season. I feel like these recent lunar readings and these recent lunar events have been, they felt like quite prominent, quite pivotal. So I do feel that we're going through a bend right now in our timeline that is really important, and it's as though, it's determining what timeline we're going to enter into and with who. It's determining what trajectory we it's then possible for us to go through as a product of our choices that we've made. So really important times. Obviously, never take yourself or life too seriously, all as well. But you're in life, and this is what you're experiencing right now, and it's going to matter to you. So pay attention, and sending everyone lots of love. Please like and subscribe if you enjoyed this reading, and stay tuned with me for the next reading at the new moon. Many thanks.